Coming in at number 10, we have Ultimate Captain America versus Ultimate Giant Man. Now, the Ultimate Universe is well known for being a bit edgier and darker than the regular Marvel Universe, and no two characters better represent this than its versions of Steve Rogers and Hank Pym, with Steve being a much more violent soldier and Hank being a self-loathing domestic abuser. Following an incident in which he set his ants upon his own wife, Steve Rogers confronted Hank Pym inside a bar against the orders of his superiors and demanded Hank change size and fight him. The resulting brawl destroys half of a city block, but ends with Steve still being able to knock Hank unconscious, showing that in this case, size definitely isn't everything.
Next on our list at number 9 is The Thing versus the Hulk. This is a classic showdown that many of you may already be aware of, where Ben Grimm and Bob Banner go at it in the middle of the city streets. Side note, Stan Lee accidentally referred to the Hulk's alter ego as Bob Banner instead of Bruce for a few months before correcting it. Just some trivia for you. Anyway, the reason why they're fighting is basically that the Hulk is going crazy and smashing everything in sight, trying to reach his goal of finding the Avengers to take them down. When the Hulk easily knocks out the Human Torch and holds on to him like a prize at the county fair, the Thing watches by the sidelines wanting to get involved. Then, after Invisible Woman tries to protect the Human Torch with an invisible force screen, she too is rendered unconscious by the Hulk. So the Thing has to take things into his own hands and fight the Hulk himself. The fight goes on for pages and pages, with buildings being knocked down, buses being torn in half. At one point the Thing drives a boat. It's crazy. Unfortunately, it ends with the crazed Hulk getting the best of Benjamin Grimm, leaving him exhausted both physically and mentally, clambering back to his feet. Alright, at number 8 we've got Superman versus SHAZAM. In 1996's Kingdom Come, we witness a fight between these two, initiating at the end of issue 3 and carrying out into issue 4. The reason behind the fight is complicated, but to keep it simple, SHAZAM has been brainwashed by Lex Luthor, so it's not really him controlling his own actions. But it is a tough thing watching as an aging Superman basically gets beaten up so badly that he almost dies. In this storyline, Superman has the pure intentions of trying to corral a new generation of less than heroic superheroes to help bring peace back to Earth. And with internal resistance on that front, and also these plots by his typical enemies to imprison him, he's really just not ready to defend himself. Not to mention, he's totally caught off guard, and once again, he's older. Luckily, after some serious blows of magical electricity coming from SHAZAM, Superman is finally able to get through to his alter ego and speak directly to Billy Batson, saving himself and ultimately a whole lot more from what could have been a game-changing move for Lex Luthor and the others. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of destruction done when SHAZAM sacrifices himself to detonate an enormous bomb early in the air above the battlefield, saving countless lives.
Number 7, Black Widow and Black Widow. While when most think of Black Widow, they think of Natasha Romanoff, there is another. This second Black Widow is Yelena Belova. While she and Nat would become allies, they started off as actual enemies. Both of them were raised and trained in the Red Room, and Yelena felt that she was the one who should hold the title of Black Widow, not Natasha. Nat would eventually have to use manipulation to make Yelena see that being the Black Widow was not this amazing pinnacle to aspire to. These two would, as I said, eventually get along, but it was a really rocky start, with Yelena viewing Natasha as a traitor, and the latter seeing the former as deluded. I'm gonna introduce Yelena to the MCU, so I have a question. How many of you are Yelena fans, or even knew about her? Small random test sample survey, go!
Coming in at number 6 is Namor, again, versus Daredevil this time. In this instance, Namor is being arrested as if the human legal system is any match for a superhero, and to represent him, he decides to hire the blind Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. Basically, Namor is angry because he wants a place on land for his people who have only ever lived under the sea. In fact, he actually wants to sue the entire human race for denying them their birthright, as he calls it. Matt, being the pragmatic lawyer that he is, simply acknowledges that there's just no legal precedent for suing the whole human race. This obvious and very astute point throws Namor the Submariner into a rage that he takes to the streets without using the door. And in this moment is actually when Daredevil first wears the red suit that we all know, and it's in preparation for his fight with Namor, where Daredevil is off to protect humanity from an outraged underwater superhero. So, this fight between two superheroes is heated by an external issue that forces them to clash. In so many words, Daredevil's sense of duty is clashing against Namor's rage. They take the fight directly to the streets, busting down lampposts, crumbling brick walls, and even taking over a wrecking ball at one point. The fight ends with Namor winning, naturally, claiming that Daredevil had been the most courageous of all his foes, at least, despite having faced off against the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. And that's a pretty good accolade for Daredevil if I've got to say anything about it.
Number 5. Namor and Black Panther. Two kings fighting over whose kingdom is better and who should have mastery. Also, they just really clash personality wise. It takes a decent amount of ego to rule, and T'Challa handles his with more grace than Namor, who can at times fall into megalomania and just slips into straight up villainy sometimes too. Still, these two can also respect each other. You can make their relationship fairly malleable. But well, they've fought for decades and fans have a very let them fight mentality, alongside a who would win. Black Panther stabbed Namor that one time. Namor's been killed a few times actually. Beheaded by Hyperion once. Ouch.
Okay, at number 4, it's the battle between Thor and Beta Ray Bill. This battle is pretty epic considering it's the fight that would determine whether or not Beta Ray Bill is worthy of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. He'd already shown his worth by actually being able to pick it up, but that wasn't enough, as Thor fights back against his new contender. The battle rages into a river of lava, leaving both warriors exhausted, lying on an obsidian raft. But they float steadily towards a lava fall, waterfall made of lava, you know what I mean. Beta Ray Bill shows his worth further by saving an unconscious Thor from the deadly plunge. After all is said and done, the two warriors end in a draw, approaching Odin with the results. And instead of taking away Thor's hammer and handing it over to Bill, Odin offers him a brand new weapon called Stormbreaker. So it turns out okay in the end. But this is a battle for the history books, with two of the most powerful superheroes in the whole Marvel universe facing off for the glory of respect and worthiness.
Number 3. The Punisher and Batman. Yes, another crossover. The Punisher and Batman have met, teamed up, and hated almost every second of it. And I'm pretty sure you can guess why. They pretty much have the polar opposite philosophies when it comes to how to handle crime. Punisher's is, well, bullet to the head, and Batman's is reformation, take them to Arkham, they can all be saved, I won't become what they are. This all came to a head when Batman actually saved the Joker from Punisher. He got in between them, between the Punisher, the gun, and Joker, and then told the Joker to run for his life. Frank fights him for a bit at first, but then just becomes so disgusted with him that he tells him that him and the Joker deserve each other and just leaves. Ouch. Batman on his side thinks the Punisher is unhinged and belongs in Arkham. Punisher/Batman Deadly Nights was a good read.
At number 2, we've got Batman vs Superman. This turn of events is so impactful on the storyline we're used to that it was turned into a movie. These two had a relationship so tight they were like brothers, who sometimes fought. But most of the time these fights would be due to mind control, like in the Hush storyline when Superman is brainwashed by Poison Ivy and sent to attack Batman. But we all know the fight that really puts these two near the top of our list is the one in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. This storyline, set in the future, depicts an older, more brutal Batman who is wreaking havoc against crime in Gotham. And when the government notices Batman acting out of sorts, they send Superman after him to put a stop to it. And this fight is epic. What really makes it cool is that you'd expect a human Batman to be totally outmatched by the Kryptonian alien Superman, but the matchup is more even than you'd expect. And it ends with the two in what seems like almost a draw. But that's where I'll leave it for the few of you who don't know what happens still. Needless to say, it's a pretty insane face-off, but I think it's fair to say that the world is better off with these heroes on the same side. Okay, finally at number 1, there's Avengers vs X-Men. This showdown has happened before this new event coming out soon, it just didn't involve the Eternals. And of course the context will most likely be different. But in the original Avengers vs X-Men event, the disagreements start with the two factions having opposing views on how to approach dealing with Phoenix Force. On one hand, the X-Men think the Phoenix Force will bring a rebirth to mutant species, a cause they have always felt very passionate about. But the Avengers are concerned that Phoenix Force will basically wipe out all life on Earth. When 5 of the X-Men are possessed by the Force, the battle then becomes more complicated, with this third team now involved. And what's good about this is that the Phoenix 5 then become a common enemy between the remaining X-Men and the Avengers, who start trying to take them out one by one. Eventually, it's just Cyclops with the Phoenix Force in him, and he basically gets turned into full-blown Dark Phoenix, putting an end to the fighting between the Avengers and the X-Men. Because you don't really have time to fight each other when there's a Dark Phoenix with a laser vision flying around.
Number 10. Black Widow and the Invisible Woman. Starting off our list with something new and mild from the Invisible Woman solo series. This recasts her past as a secret agent. So before she married Reed, she worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. and ran covert ops, which with her power set actually makes a lot of sense. The story thus far is that her past partner has gone missing and she's gonna break all the rules to go behind enemy lines to find him. This involves her teaming up with Black Widow, who suddenly has a massive chip on her shoulder about superheroes. So Sue has to prove herself to her. She has to prove that she's not like other superheroes. Natasha, are you okay? You've been on so many superhero teams. I know you're a clone, but you have all the memories of the other Nat, who HYDRA Cap killed. So these two just have beef until Sue proves herself to her by faking a drinking contest. So it's low, because it's not full hate or sustained, but it's odd. This is a 5-issue mini, by the way. It's pretty good. Check it out if you have the time. This is manufactured conflict. Manufactured conflict is manufactured. Does Nat not remember the time Sue fought the entire Avengers team to a standstill after the government took her kids and forced them out of the Baxter building? Reed's just noped out of that. He knows better than to try and stop an angry Sue. Number 9. Hal Jordan and Batman. So Green Lantern and Batman, since they started teaming up in the late Silver Age, Brave and the Bold, there has been friction. Batman has never fully appreciated Hal's attitude, which ranges from cavalier to I'm doing exactly what the Guardians tell me. But this really came to a head when Hal went evil. And also there's some beef from Hal's side from the time he was desperate enough to go to Bruce for help with his alcoholism and just got turned away. Post Parallax, Bruce wanted nothing to do with Spectre Hal and didn't trust him at all. And when he came back to life, he still didn't trust him and then got extra mad because everybody judged him for it. But honestly, he had good reason. Just because all the people you killed came back to life doesn't mean you didn't kill them in the first place. Eventually these two would find an even keel through an, in my opinion, contrived sequence where Bruce couldn't handle a power ring despite having wielded one multiple times before. All of this ended up being shifted more into frenemy mode in the New 52, where all of a sudden these two were all about each other. Bruce revealed his identity on purpose to Hal first, he lets Hal fly him places. I don't know, I have questions. I notice things. Other people are like, oh, where's Darkseid? And I'm like, is Hal's hand around Bruce's waist? Enhance image. No shame in my game. We all make our own fun. Number 8. Hawkman and Green Arrow. So Carter Hall and Oliver Queen hate each other for the same reason that Hal and Ollie should hate each other, but the comics insist they don't. A fundamental difference of opinion. Green Arrow leans really left, to the point where he just yells at Hal, for example, for being a space cop and for listening to the Guardians, ever. He just yells at him and calls him stupid and a stick in the mud, all kinds of things, but they're best friends? Like, what is going on with Hal's self-esteem? You don't have to take that. Anyway, Hawkman leans more right. These terminologies are stateside ones, by the way. These terms mean different things depending upon where you are in the world. So these two butt heads, or they did pre-Flashpoint. Post-Flashpoint in the New 52, except we mostly forget this was a thing. These two used to have some huge blow-up arguments. It's mostly been forgotten because of the struggle of what do we do with these characters in the first place. Just never forget, Oliver Queen will scream in your face if you have a different opinion than him on social issues, but when push comes to shove and he finds out his ward is a drug addict, he will slap him across the face and kick him out. So, all talk, huh?
Alright, at number 7, we've got Reed Richards versus Namor. This is a spicy face-off as it's a classic fight of jealousy and competition over a woman's affection. Susan Storm is unconscious in the hospital and the arrogant and shameless Namor keeps making advances on her right in front of Richard. This escalates to the point where Namor actually makes a move on Susan as she's just barely coming to, and right when Reed enters the room as well. Susan tries to de-escalate the situation, but it's no use due to her injuries and fatigue, so the two heroes go after it. As they rip through the city streets, they throw insults at each other as they tear apart cafes, cars, and the road. It's a pretty fiery battle that Richard seems to know he's at risk of losing due to Namor's sheer strength, but Reed takes the win in the end, exclaiming in a heroic monologue that his anger isn't actually directed at Namor, but at himself for not being a good husband to Susan throughout the years. It's a pretty epic battle with some realistic and possibly relatable motivations, giving it a rightful spot on our list.
Number 6. Captain Marvel and Iron Man. This is Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel, who is currently having a villain arc in the comics at the time of this recording. A purposeful one, not one by accident. And it's a good play. Lean into it. play with it. That's smart marketing. Anyway, despite years of friendship, her and Tony fell through over Minority Report. I mean, an Inhuman, Ulysses, who could tell the future. And when Rhodey died as a driving plot force, he was dating Carol at the time, it was on. She felt she could have prevented it if she knew the future. Tony was all, I don't agree. Also, I was the antagonist in the last Civil War. It's not a good look. Don't do it. She was all, screw you. I'm starting a teenage Gestapo and getting several people killed. Get ready to be beaten into a coma, Care Bear. He calls her Care Bear, so I'm flipping it back. Yeah, this was intense. The Civil War arcs go hard. You go from fighting alongside someone to contemplating murdering them. However, unlike the first Civil War, they scramble to undo any lasting character damage, so Tony just got over it. I built myself a new body, it's fine.
Number 5, Spider-Man and the Red Goblin. The Red Goblin. It's a mix between the Green Goblin and Carnage. I mean, you have a combination of two of the most powerful bad guys ever against Peter. He shouldn't have won this, I don't think. Let me explain. Appearing in the Amazing Spider-Man 798, this all came to life after Norman Osborn stole the Carnage symbiote, and after that, all hell just broke loose. He created this monster. So Norman used the Carnage symbiote to eject all the nanites, but then that ended up creating this monster mashup becoming the Red Goblin. It was like a science experiment that made things worse for everyone, but better for him almost. So the rare weaknesses that the symbiote did have went away once the two had merged, making him like unstoppable. Peter Parker for sure should have lost this battle. I mean, he's so overpowered here. I mean, even the bombs that he throws at Spider-Man are upgraded versions of his own bombs. This time around, the bombs are red Carnage bombs that Pete can't even sense, all fused together, and it's really intimidating. It's very scary. So Pete seems to agree by his choice of words. Peter admits a few pages later, after he retreats, that he couldn't last 3 minutes in the ring with him. Yeah, I agree. The readers are like, absolutely, you're absolutely right. The final issue had Peter get the upper hand on Osborn by mind games? Yeah, he explains how Carnage will get all the glory here in this defeat of Spider-Man and not Norman Osborn. I mean, ego is a great place to attack. If it works, it works. So when he becomes Norman Osborn again, the fight is manageable now, and Spider-Man can come out on top. Now, as great as this is, I really don't think it would be this easy to turn the tides. Not after seeing Carnage bombs. Get out of here, no way.
Number 4, Batman and the Red Hood. So this is a more one-sided hate, as when Jason Todd came back to life, Batman's feelings were very conflicted, but Jason had had years to nurse his hate, a festering rage that had started long before he died, exacerbated by seeing that his death had changed nothing in Bruce's methods, that he'd been replaced by another Robin, that the Joker still lived. Red Hood was more than happy to kill to accomplish what he felt Batman could not, and go up against the rest of the Bat family. It made him dangerous, as did the fact that Bruce still cared about him. Batman doesn't do feelings the best though, so the anger eventually manifested mutually. These days Jason is in more of a black sheep capacity, but these two still aren't good. Batman backhanded him that one time in Rebirth. Just why do people keep having him do that? Stop it.
Alright, here we are at number 3 with Captain America versus Iron Man, or just the Civil War storyline. I'm gonna mash those two into one because they're basically the same conflict. But Iron Man and Captain America have had a deep bond for quite some time, but there are some times when they have disagreements that turn into physical altercations. One of these fights takes place in the Armor Wars storyline when Tony Stark learns that his own technology has been stolen to create super soldiers. And when Captain America sees a chance to preserve the armor, Iron Man gets a bit physical since he wants the technology to stay exclusively to him. So Iron Man knocks out Cap with an electrical charge and leaves the room. But this altercation doesn't even compare to the fight they have during the Civil War event, which we all know has Iron Man and Captain America pitted against each other in their own factions. When Captain America goes in for a handshake in Civil War issue 3, he leaves an electron scrambler on Tony's hand, which immobilizes his whole suit, leaving him on the ground while the rest of the team faces off. But Tony isn't done, gets up to land a massive blow on Steve, tearing his mask and nearly severing his jawbone. It's sad to see old friends fight like this, but it definitely makes for a pretty exciting read.
Number 2, Reed Richards and Thor. So this occurred during the first Civil War, Civil War I. Thor was dead at this point, and so the pro-registration side felt that they needed something on their side, a big heavy hitter, some brawn. They needed some muscle. The Hulk was in space, kept there by them. This is leading up to Planet Hulk. So Reed thought, what if we just clone Thor? I have the tech, I have the DNA, I can do anything really. And Tony was like, yeah, go for it. This is why we're such good friends. Needless to say, when Thor found out about all this, he wasn't happy. He was furious. This messed up their relationship for a while, and justifiably so. Stop cloning people. Most people don't want to be cloned. Bad blood. Also, Thor didn't even want to be on that side, so double blow. Civil War, what a time, both times. I can't wait for Civil War 3. Number 1. She-Hulk and Star Fox. So She-Hulk hates Star Fox for a couple of reasons, like influencing her emotions and making her believe she was in love with John Jameson, Werewolf Jameson, and so she married him. She found this out while she was trying to discover if Star Fox had used his powers on her to make her sleep with him. This was while she was defending him for his other rapes that he had committed canonically because Thanos implanted memories in him that made him doubt himself, but not even the real Thanos. It was not the strongest plot. Jen is justifiably angry about all of this, but also at herself because he didn't influence her in the defending of him or the sleeping with him department. She changed her whole life after finding out about her and John though. She divorced John. It hurt how she could perceive her own thoughts. I hate him too. Cupid powers showcased in the grossest way. This is the plot that for many ruined Star Fox, while others are like, it's the writer's fault, not Star Fox. Share your thoughts. Number 10. Wonder Woman and Spider-Man. Now I didn't fall and hit my head, nor am I just some fake nerd girl noob. These two met in the sequel, spiritual sequel to Spider-Man and Superman's first team-up. In their first team-up, they fought Lex Luthor and Doc Ock, who had kidnapped their ladies and also were planning to blow up the Earth. So this first team-up was Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, and the sequel is just Superman and Spider-Man. Just them hanging out. It was bigger with more heroes and Doctor Doom flaunting his diplomatic immunity. However, at one point during this, Spider-Man ended up meeting Wonder Woman and basically his brain melted and he went va-va-voom, so much woman, and just hit on her constantly. Meanwhile, she had bought into the media hype by the Bugle that he was essentially a supervillain. And so the two fought, but they sorted it out quickly. He still hits on her for the rest of it though. I can imagine Wonder Woman being one of the many heroes who find Spider-Man annoying. So this is low because the hate was brief, bright, and then over. Mostly I just wanted to tell you this happened. It's one of my fave crossovers, mostly because Doom and Superman have a really deep conversation about the responsibilities about walking the earth as essentially a god. Friends, who knew? Number 9. Bishop and Gambit. So Bishop was really convinced for a time that Gambit was the traitor he was looking for who had betrayed the X-Men and led to their downfall and hence the dystopian future that he came from. So why did he think this? Well, Bishop was born and raised in this future and he was taken in by a man named LeBeau, which we know to be Gambit, Remy's last name. The man who raised him was also known as the Witness, the last person to have seen the X-Men alive. Later Bishop would come across a recording of Jean Grey who said the X-Men had been destroyed by a traitor on the inside, which led him to suspect the Witness. When he traveled back in time and met the X-Men, he came to believe that Gambit was a younger version of the Witness and fought him, and proceeded to attempt to warn anyone who would listen about him, and also just give him side-eye constantly. Gambit of course responded in kind. No one likes being accused of potential future crimes. You hear that, Carol? No one. It would later come out that Gambit was not a traitor, so these two would squash their beef. Number 8. Guy Gardner and Fire. This occurred during their time on the JLI, the Justice League International. So Guy used to be really nice, up until he received brain damage fighting Sinestro. When the writers brought him back, they felt they had to do something to cure what they called his terminal blandness, which is harsh. So they gave him a brash, rude new tooth. But since it was the result of brain damage by comic logic, if he got conked on the head again, it could just be reversed. And that's what happened. Then him and Ice, the best friend of Fire, started going out. Best friend in quotes, there's some hints there about other things going on. However, when he reverted back to his now established Guy ways, she wasn't into that, but she felt that she had seen the true man and hence was motivated to stay with him, even though he frequently embarrassed her or made her uncomfortable. This made Fire not like Guy very much at all, and while he didn't appreciate her butting into his relationship, this would all be solved, including the eventual Superman Guy Ice triangle, by Ice dying. That's one way to end a feud. The writers would later go on to say that her death was a mistake, an attempt at drama that fell flat. Number 7. Jean Grey and Emma Frost. This comes to us from New X-Men, the Grant Morrison run. And the genesis of this one, we've talked about it numerous times at this point. Jean and Cyclops were having problems. Emma, fresh off surviving the Genoshan genocide, started giving him psychic therapy. During this point, the two started having a psychic affair, an affair where she would masquerade as Jean as the Phoenix. It was all kinda messed up. So when Jean found out about all this, she was understandably upset. Less understandably, she psychically tortured Emma because of it. When Jean lets her powers go, she's terrifying. Full stop. Anybody who questions how she uses them has a long history to call back upon. This conflict would be solved through plot convenience. Jean would just kinda become the Phoenix and poof away. way. Now that description will bother some people who really felt the gravitas of her sacrifice, but different strokes for different folks. Maybe I'm Zorn. I was Zorn the whole time. Who wasn't Zorn but was Zorn. Number 6. Storm and Emma Frost. Emma and Storm have beef, and Storm gets along with Doom, so that's saying something. Although, is it? Lots of people get along with Doom. Doctor Strange stayed at his castle with him when they went to rescue Doom's mom, and they had a nice time, at least it seemed like it. They had a nice dinner. I want to have dinner with Doom. So when Emma was the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, she tortured Storm, trying to force information from her mind. Emma even pulled the, I don't want to hurt you, I want us to be friends. So obviously, when Emma joined the team and would later rise to a role of leadership within it, a role that Storm has herself occupied at points, the best points in my opinion, she would clash with Storm. Also, Emma gives her grief for being royal and is all, Your Highness? You were the White Queen of a supervillain club. These two have fought multiple times and Emma has lost. So you can write these two as cordial, but I don't know, I like their kind of drama. A little friction is fun. Not everyone should get along perfectly. It's okay for some characters to not let everything go.
At number 5, we've got Spider-Man versus Wolverine. This face-off has such a crazy build-up that it actually needs its own issue called, you guessed it, Spider-Man versus Wolverine. They fight because Spider-Man finds himself caught up in an ongoing operation that Wolverine had been a part of for a long time before the events of this story. And it's, like I said, it's a long story, but basically this woman named Charlemagne is in such a predicament involving Russian assassins and basically an internal manhunt for her arrest, so she actually asks Wolverine to end it for her, to save her from going to a gulag. Spider-Man notices Logan is about to actually make her wish come true. He swoops in, and this is the last straw for Logan. This fight takes place in a graveyard of all places, leaving the two superheroes in a stalemate, each of them seriously threatening to end each other's life. But luckily the fight is broken up at the exact moment by a chopper with its spotlight on, and as this distraction has both of them gripped, someone creeps up on Spidey, who senses it and delivers a brutal punch. But unfortunately it wasn't Wolverine. Instead it was the woman he'd been trying to save, and the punch kills her. I mean, don't be too hard on yourself, Spidey. It's what she wanted, right? And even Logan acknowledges that she probably planned it that way.
Number 4. Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost. Yes, Emma made the list twice. Look, a lot of people have problems with her. Take it up with them. This is again because of Emma's time as a villain. Kitty met her for the first time when she was young and Emma had imprisoned them, and she never forgot it and hasn't really forgiven. Kitty finds Emma to be cold, cruel, and manipulative and doesn't trust her. She's made sure that she can best her, and Emma is a little afraid of her. I mean, you should be afraid of someone who hates you so passionately and openly, but sometimes Emma has proved her right. On Emma's side, she's a bit colder about it, but it's hard to like someone who hates you and makes such a loud show of it, also rips your heart out. Their fights are really cool though. Phasing fights are always great, and then you add a psychic element to that and you've got a great matchup. Number 3. Hawkeye and the Swordsman. Yeah, classic beef. So Hawkeye was a villain before he eventually had a change of heart. Now the Swordsman actually started off as a villain for Hawkeye. He had actually trained Hawkeye when the two were both villains. At that point he was called Trickshot, which is a better name. So when the Swordsman wanted to join the Avengers, obviously Clint didn't trust him and kept a close eye on him, which led to him being denied entry, which then led to him kidnapping Captain America. So yeah, hate justified. The Swordsman has been on the Avengers since though, so I guess he got what he wanted. Number 2. The Darkness and WITCHBLADE. Yes, we're leaving Marvel and DC for a moment. I know, it's a September 26th miracle. I filmed it that day. What kind of miracle is it? Whenever you're watching it, it's that day's miracle. So the WITCHBLADE is actually conceived as the result of a truce liaison between the Darkness, a cosmic entity, and Angelus, the embodiment of God's light, whom the Darkness resents for bringing life into the empty chaos that had been its domain. The Darkness would begin inhabiting human hosts as time went on, passing itself down through a chosen bloodline, always male. He would still bear the grudge against Angelus and manifest that in his attitude to those who wielded the WITCHBLADE. Their confrontations are violent, dangerous, and at times oddly sexual, because WITCHBLADE is, if you've seen WITCHBLADE, it's a lot. It's an intriguing relationship that will span all of time, played out through human hosts. Number 1. Cyclops and Wolverine. All of you from part 1 were like, Sasha, Cyclops and Wolverine hate each other? Everyone knows this. And yes, they do. But they were on rivalries. But yes, this has crossed the line into hate on more than one occasion, and is part of what people know about them, so they deserve to be on here too. How do they hate each other? Let me count the ways. They were fighting over the same woman, yes, but that's only part of it. A small part. They have fundamentally different personalities personalities, and even with her gone, they still fight with each other. Scott is uptight and wound so tight he could snap, and he does sometimes. He leads through countermeasures, so oftentimes as an opposing force rather than an inspiring one. He kowtows to authority and loves rules and order. Wolverine is a much more free agent, driven by passion, thumbing his nose at authority, and is softer than he would first appear on the surface. He also feels that Scott is a bit of a hypocrite. This is cause when push comes to shove, Cyclops is usually pretty happy to let Wolverine do the things that he can't. Here's the thing, these two can also be friends. It's a weird dynamic where just a few things would need to shift and they'd be a terrifying, unstoppable duo. So it's probably a good thing most of the time that they can't see their way clear to that.
At number 10, we have Cyclops versus Wolverine. In X-Men Schism number 4, a fight breaks out between these two superheroes because of a complex decision on how to face an onslaught of Sentinels unleashed by the world's powers. And as an enormous, seemingly regenerative Sentinel is approaching the two of them, Cyclops insists on allowing the young X-Men to stay and fight, while Wolverine believes it's wrong to put young ones in harm's way. So it's a battle between should we stay and fight or run and regroup. Well, Wolverine gets outranked by Cyclops, but instead of backing down, he goes to their home base and sets 2,000 pounds of explosives to go off at the press of a button to take out the Sentinel and allow for a distraction as they get away. Cyclops is angered by the subordination and decides to take it out on Wolverine as they start to battle it out. And the Sentinel is coming right towards them just to make everything worse. Maybe not the best time to pick an epic fight, guys, but it is a tough call and both arguments make sense to me in different ways. I guess this stuff just sometimes happens.
Coming in at number 9, we have Hawkeye versus the Incredible Hulk. While most battles with the Hulk turn into massive city-spanning brawls, this hero versus hero encounter is more tragic than anything else. During the event known as Civil War II, the Avengers receive a vision from the future that appears to show the Hulk killing most of his teammates. Given that Bruce Banner hasn't turned into the creature for at least a year by this point, the other Avengers are obviously concerned. Unfortunately, they barely have a chance to debate with Bruce before Hawkeye has shot a fatal arrow, killing Bruce instantly. And while it would later be revealed that Bruce had asked Hawkeye to do this to prevent him from hurting anyone else, and that Bruce would also eventually be resurrected by his own gamma mutation, it still was a tremendously dramatic and intense moment in an event filled with dramatic and intense moments. Coming in at number 8, we're taking a detour into the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Thor vs. Hulk from the third Thor film, Thor Ragnarok. After being stranded on the mysterious planet of Sakaar, Thor is originally overjoyed to see his friend from work, Bruce Banner. Unfortunately, the Hulk has fully embraced his new role as a Sakaarian gladiator, fighting under the Grandmaster, and Thor has to battle with his former ally for the amusement of the crowd. This fight scene is one of the funnest in the entire MCU, and has delighted fans ever since it was first shown off in the very first Ragnarok trailer, giving us multiple callbacks to other films and giving us a delightful new status quo for Thor and the Hulk. At number 7, we've got to go with the classic storyline of Hulk versus the Maestro. Bruce Banner often has to face off against different mental versions of the Hulk inside his head, but this alternate version of himself from a post-apocalyptic future is the real deal. Naming himself Maestro after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter, this version of the Hulk has become far stronger than the Hulk's usual starting strength, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. I'd say that's a little bit of overkill though. Coming in at number 6, we have Spider-Man versus Iron Man. While these two characters have a close relationship in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even fought on the same side during the MCU Civil War, things are a bit more complicated in the comic books. Originally siding with Iron Man and even going so far as to reveal his identity to the public to support the Superhero Registration Act, Peter Parker eventually began to regret his actions and turned against his former friend. While Iron Man attempted to stop Spidey with a failsafe safe protocol built into his iron spider suit, Peter revealed that he'd already reprogrammed it, showing that sometimes Tony Stark isn't the cleverest person in the room.
Number 5. The Hulk and the Thing, halfway through with a classic battle. Many fans will remember these big brawls between the Hulk and the Thing. Fun fact, the Hulk was actually inspired by the success of the Thing in the Fantastic Four. Fans very much have a let them fight mentality. The Hulk freaks Ben out. Classic Hulk, that is, with how brainless and mindless he is. It's like looking into an uncomfortable funhouse mirror, because they are so similar. Early Hulk hated most people, Hulk smash and all that, but these two would eventually become friends, and it's sweet. Ben needs more friends. Friends who don't turn him into rock monsters. It's understandable why people still think they hate each other though. They just fought again the other day in a fight that made me cringe for the Thing. He got so hurt and it looked so painful. The rock part came off and it exposed his fleshy underbelly. This looked really painful.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Hulk versus Vision. During a battle with the Hulk, when Bruce Banner had lost control of the monster, the Vision attempted to use his density powers to make himself as strong and immovable as the Hulk, only to find the Hulk was able to grow past his own strength. To thwart this, the Vision had to phase into the Hulk himself, trying to forge a mental connection with the Green Beast and reach Bruce Banner within. The visuals of a superhero literally phasing into another are both honestly super cool looking, but it winds up taking both the Vision's mental attacks and the pleading of Betty Ross to finally snap the Hulk out of it and return Bruce Banner's mind to the surface. At number 3, we've got the original Clone Saga, the story of Peter Parker versus Ben Reilly. For years, the biggest question in all of Spidey comics was, who is the real Peter Parker? The hero we've been following for years, or this new character originally introduced as Ben Reilly? Also going under the name of the Scarlet Spider, these two characters would go back and forth from friends to enemies and everything in between, with Ben even taking the main Spider-Man label for a while as they struggled with questions of identity and who was behind their complicated lives. That's some clone drama at its very finest. Coming in at number 2, we have Captain America versus Iron Man in the MCU film Captain America: Civil War. While their fight in the comic books is an incredible spectacle all on its own, my personal favorite confrontation is how this movie deals with its final battle. Building us up with the expectation that Iron Man and Cap will have to team up to defeat an army of evil Winter Soldiers, a plot twist is thrown our way when the soldiers are revealed to be dead, and Baron Zemo reveals the reason he led the heroes out all this way was to show that Bucky Barnes killed Tony Stark's parents. Unable to accept that Cap never told him, Tony attacks Steve Rogers, and the two have a climactic battle that their friendship never really recovered from until the events of Avengers Endgame. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Thor versus Iron Man following the events of the Civil War comic book series. Tony Stark has made a lot of iffy choices in the comics, but few have been as disastrous as his attempt at a Thor clone. Intended to be a powerful deterrent against Cap's team during Civil War, this clone called Ragnarok quickly went out of control and caused the deaths of several heroes. Whenever the true Thor returned, he was furious at what Tony had done with his genetic code and fried every system in the suit of Iron Man armor, leaving Tony to walk back to Avengers HQ humiliated and defeated with one of the most decisive superhero smackdowns in comic book history.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Spider-Man, Jester, and Jack-O-Lantern. The MCU's Captain America's Civil War is much more tame than the comic book. I mean, for starters, in the comic, Peter sides with Tony until he realizes that Tony is spying on him, so he switches over to Cap's side. That didn't happen in the movie at all. So in the comic, this causes Stark to send out Jester and Jack-O-Lantern to go and fight Spider-Man. So Peter ended up getting his butt kicked to these guys, and it's all thanks to Stark. There's no chance also that Peter should have lost to them. I mean, imagine if he didn't lose, the entire story would be so different. At first, the two thought taking orders from S.H.I.E.L.D. was a bum deal, as they put it, a bum deal. That is until they got the orders to fight Spider-Man, which they made very clear that they enjoyed doing. And before we continue on with this list, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video, it helps the channel out a lot. We really appreciate it. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now back to our list. Number 9, Batman vs. Guy Gardner. Okay, this one comes from Justice League issue 5, and it's commonly known as the punch. We have a punch and we have a slap. Now it's time to talk about the punch. So in this comic, Batman comes to take over the Justice League International, and Guy Gardner doesn't share the same enthusiasm as the rest of the team. So for more than one issue, he makes it very clear that he doesn't like this new leader. He's not a fan of the bats. So naturally, a large conflict was growing, although Batman was clearly the better fit for the role. So he challenged Batman to a fight without the use of his power ring. Big mistake. And then Batman proceeded to knock him out with one punch. One punch, one punch. Yes, here we go. Blue Beetle even got pumped about it and started yelling, one punch, one punch. Hence why it's a big thing now. This is an amazing moment and an even greater lesson rather, but a Green Lantern getting knocked out by a human punch should never happen, ever. Never. Don't start fights you can't win without the ring that makes you a superhero, or else you're just a guy in a suit. Pun intended. Number 8, Bruiser vs. Wolverine. Runaways, issue 12. So we see Logan and Molly Hayes, aka Bruiser, have a rather quick exchange. Now at this time, Wolverine was a member of the new Avengers and he's trying to get to the bottom of what happened to Dagger. So he, Cap, and Iron Man went to find help from the Runaways, seeing as the signs were leading to Cloak being responsible. So Molly is one of the strongest heroes ever, for sure. But how she handled Wolverine was almost a little bit too easy. So they walk into the cathedral, Cap calmly asks her to stop screaming and that Wolverine and him are not going to hurt her. Laying the foundation, good. Said very calm, from a very calm man, this is good. The screaming continues and Wolverine even asks if she's heard of heightened senses and then gives her 3 seconds to stop drilling a hole into his brain. So he counts 3, 2, and then the next page we have outside face down Logan in the snow. Then when he comes back in, he's quite embarrassed about what just happened, even saying how he won't tell anybody tonight what happened if they don't, as he brushes off some snow.
Coming in at number 7, we have Captain America versus Star-Lord. Also taking place in the event Civil War II, this superhero showdown was thankfully a lot less personal for Cap than the original Civil War event, but also featured some heroes that weren't around for the first superhero smackdown. One of the most notable of those heroes was Star-Lord, who wasn't yet a big name during Civil War I, but had seen renewed success following the release of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and thus was a shoe-in to be featured in the sequel. Coming to Captain Marvel's aid as she stood on the pro-Future Vision side of the debate, Star-Lord soon found himself in fisticuffs with Captain America himself, complaining about having to fight a guy with a shield. We've all been there, Peter. We've all been there.
Number 6, Squirrel Girl and Dr. Doom. So Squirrel Girl has beaten some big bads in the Marvel Universe before. She's taken down MODOK, Mandarin, and at one point Thanos. It's becoming a running joke by now, but one defeat that always shocks me is when a bunch of squirrels took down Victor Von Doom. Just a bunch of squirrels. Yeah, it happened back in the 90s in Marvel Superheroes issue 8. So she bumps into Iron Man and then starts to show what she can do, alright? She's trying to give him a run for his money in order to show how rough and tough she really can be. So she shows him her mutant powers, like jumping, hopping, climbing, all like a squirrel. It's amazing. He's fascinated. She's even pumped to show him that she can also sound like a squirrel too, which, I mean, if you can do it, I would love to see that. Fair. But the most impressive of all these abilities has to be when an abundance of squirrels is commanded to jump onto Stark, and then enter Dr. Doom. Doom comes in and he interrupts Stark's electronics. So, in order to save Tony at this point, she needs to send a horde of squirrels onto the Doom ship. Just a horde of squirrels. As if they don't have, wives and kids to go back home. They have nuts to store and eat. They have things to do, alright? And voila! Stark is free thanks to the insane squirrel posse. Then the rodents get their fur on Dr. Doom and he's forced to retreat and jump into nearby water. It's the best panel ever. He's like, squirrels? No way, man, I'm out of here. Good riddance, peace. And then he literally runs away and jumps. Like he's out of there. He wants nothing to do with that. One of those times you're happy the hero won, but like, squirrels? We have a lot of squirrels up here in Canada. I don't think they can take on Dr. Doom. They're pretty fat.
At number 5, we've got Miles Morales versus Miles Morales versus Miles Morales versus Miles Morales? That's right, it's a 4-way battle this time, as just like the original Spider-Man, Miles Morales wound up getting his own clone saga. When a villain known as the Assessor experimented on Miles' spider-modified DNA, he was able to create 3 rapidly aging clones, each with their own quirks and variations on Miles' base powers. Going by the names of Shift, Salim, and Mind Spinner, these 3 clones weren't inherently evil, but were dead set on finding a cure to their rapid clone degeneration, a miscommunication that wound up bringing them into conflict with the real Miles Morales.
Number 4, Batman and the Hulk. Yep, you heard me. So back in the late 70s, Marvel and DC came together for a handful of crossovers. One of these crossovers featured a battle with the Incredible Hulk and Batman. There have been many conversations about who would win in a fight between Iron Man and Batman. If you're a fan of this page, odds are you've had this talk with your friends, because they're both humans who rely on their brains and brawn to get by, kind of even. Personally, I'd pick Batman to win that fight any day. But the Hulk, no chance. Batman vs. the Hulk, issue 27 of DC Comics Special Series. So we have Batman and the Joker trying to control the Green Giant. And when the Hulk gets his hands on Batman, well, that should have been the end for sure. Even Batman said he felt like his spine was going to snap like a pencil. And believe me, if anybody knows what that feels like, it's definitely Batman. So he gets out of his grasp by a nice double ear smack, and then he finishes him off by using some sleeping gas from his belt, followed by a nice flying kick. Now, it's great to see Batman use his skills to take down the Beast. That's what he's good at. Unfortunately, I don't think any fight between them would ever last long enough to give him the chance to do so, especially if he has him in his hands. He would be dead.
Coming in at number 3, we have Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, a battle so long overdue that Spider-Man vs. Wolverine is literally the name of the comic it appeared in. Following the murder of his friend Ned Leeds, Peter Parker is rescued from gangsters by Wolverine while in Europe, and forced to use a low-quality Spider-Man fan costume he buys from a store. Originally working as teammates, Spider-Man and Wolverine unfortunately come to blows as Spidey realizes that Wolverine intends to kill the villains they've been fighting, and has to take on the bloodlust-crazed mutant to prevent him from killing a woman named Charlie. Unfortunately, the woman winds up jumping in front of one of Spidey's fists herself, killing herself and traumatizing Peter in a very dark one-off that's probably best left in the 80s where it belongs.
Number 2, Thor and the Incredible Hulk. Thor Ragnarok is easily one of the best installments in the Infinity Saga. Taika Waititi is returning to the studio to do Thor Love and Thunder, and I can't wait. He's super funny. If you haven't seen What We Do in the Shadows, go watch it out. It's his best work, I'd say. And Jojo Rabbit. He makes good movies. So one of my favorite scenes from the movie is also one that makes fans pretty annoyed. Now this part in the movie had to happen so the plot can move a certain way, and we got to see a cool battle take place in the meantime, but it's also kind of unrealistic. So the Grandmaster's great champion, of course, ends up being Thor's friend from work, Hulk. Now he's been there for a while after Sokovia, so he's not the same green guy as they last saw. Thor spent most of the fight getting it handed to him. He was trying to talk to Bruce, trying to calm him down, give him little arm tickles. It wasn't working out. Until he tapped into his true powers and unleashed a good number of lightning bolts to the face. That ought to do it. So Thor is about to finish off Sakar's champion once and for all until the Grandmaster himself intervened. If only he had replaced that remote for like 2 seconds, this movie would have gone a much different route. Maybe less fun, but probably more honest. And finally, number 1, Old Man Logan and the Hulk. I like the Hulk. He shouldn't really lose anything ever. That's the point I'm getting at. Seeing the Hulk fight Wolverine is something I hope we can see on the big screen in my lifetime. I mean, with all these franchises crossing over soon with WandaVision and stuff, maybe it's sooner than we think, but I doubt it. They have no reason to fight yet. But one of the highlight battles between these two beasts take place in Old Man Logan. Now, at the end of the story, Logan went back to finish off Hulk Gang, right? Of course. So soon after the Hulk comes out, they start fighting, even throwing cows at one another. Real wild stuff. Funny, gory, scary, loud, you name it. And then he turns into the big green guy, and boy, does it get ugly. So Billy Bob comes in the cave later on and sees just a mess. He sees bodies all over the floor, and then he sees Hulk struggling with some digestion problems. Odd. So then Wolverine literally rips his way out of his stomach, and that's what kills the Hulk. The Hulk should have won this fight for sure. If he didn't make the mistake of eating him, he probably could have done it. Or the Hulk should have healed after the whole Wolverine C-section thing, so the fight should have maybe continued. I mean, for the story to end this way, it was a little disappointing.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Wolverine vs. Wolverine from Marvel's Age of Ultron event. Now, as a mutant that's been cloned once, twice, or even several dozen times, Wolverine is certainly no stranger to having to cross claws with a version of himself. However, the time-traveling shenanigans involved in stopping Ultron's complete takeover of Earth has to be one of the most notable. After making the incredibly difficult decision decision to travel back in time and kill the creator of Ultron, Hank Pym, Wolverine found out that the new Pymless future he'd created was even worse than the one he'd left, and was immediately attacked by this apocalyptic future's version of Wolverine. Then again, considering the entire reason this version of Earth was now destroyed was partially due to a war with the Skrulls, we can maybe understand why the future Wolverine would be a bit suspicious of any newcomers. At number 9, we have our very first clone of the list with the battle between Thor and his cyborg copy, Ragnarok. During the events of Civil War, the real Thor was presumed dead after saving Asgard from destruction. As a means of reinforcing his side of the conflict, Tony Stark wound up using a strand of Thor's hair to create a half-flesh, half-machine clone of the fallen Avenger. A plan that went horribly off the rails when the cloned Thor, dubbed Ragnarok, killed the superhero Goliath and converted many heroes onto Captain America's side. When the real Thor was eventually resurrected, he wasted little time in completely dominating and destroying his copy, proving once and for all who the true God of Thunder is. Coming in at number 8, we've got another Avenger fighting a less than worthy variant with Captain America versus HYDRA Cap. After an alternate Steve Rogers that had grown up as a devout follower of HYDRA wound up taking over the entire United States in a particularly controversial Marvel storyline, the world was overjoyed to see the real Steve Rogers return and finally put this imposter in his place. Literally bursting forth out of a shard of the cosmic cube, the true Steve Rogers was able to fight back against this twisted version of everything he stood for and eventually break his armor down with a little help from the worthiness deciding Mjolnir.
Number 7. Captain America and Sharon Carter. We go back now again to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by Sharon Carter. Yeah, after Crossbones sniped him, Agent 13, who was also at the time Cap's girlfriend, delivered the final bullet from a much closer point. Well, it turns out it wasn't Sharon who was doing the work, really. I mean, the classic brainwashing made this defeat happen. Dr. Faustus, yeah, this causes a whole chain of events. I mean, for starters, Bucky decides at that point that he should go and try and kill Iron Man, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers. And then Falcon also goes after his own lead. Now, Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter that Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America, and Bucky agrees to take the spot only if he can operate solo. No shield, no nothing, I'm not working for you, I'm not punching in, I'm just doing my thing. And to think that all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend of all people was the one to deliver the fatal blow, it's just heartbreaking, and it's something that never should have happened.
Coming in at number 6, we have the Battle of the Batmen with Tim Drake versus Jason Todd. Now, the many Robins of the DC universe are no strangers to occasionally squabbling amongst themselves, but when both Tim Drake and Jason Todd are dressed as Batman and beating the hell out of each other in the middle of the Batcave, well, that's just dramatic enough to earn a spot on this list. During a period of time in which Bruce Wayne is believed to have been killed by Darkseid, Jason Todd had taken over the cowl and cape and become a much deadlier Dark Knight. Not wanting Bruce's no-killing rule to be abandoned, the Bat family tried many ways to get Jason to stand down, before finally culminating in a Batman vs. Batman battle that shook the Bat family to its core. Coming in at number 5, we have the Black Panther versus Wolverine. During a storyline in which the Phoenix Force, usually residing within Jean Grey, has chosen to take a new host, a tournament is fought for who should gain the honor. Two of the combatants that are given a small amount of the Phoenix Force for their bout are Wolverine and Black Panther, both of whom are eager to battle one another to figure out which metal is stronger, Wolverine's adamantium skeleton or the vibranium of Wakanda. With both heroes even stronger and more violent than usual due to their Phoenix possession, this fight nearly threatened to burn up the entire Marvel universe. Coming in at number 4, we have Superman versus his 6-dimensional future self, which just might be the most comic book thing I have ever said out loud. When the entire DC multiverse was at stake due to Lex Luthor and his followers attempting to break the Source Wall and free the Dark Goddess Perpetua, Superman and the Justice League were forced to open a doorway to the mythical 6th dimension, where only the creators of the multiverse multiverse could usually exist. After passing through the doorway, Superman seemed to return as an older, wiser, and more enlightened version of himself, a hypothetical perfect Superman. However, this all turned out to be a ruse by Perpetua's son, the World Forger, leading to the real Superman and his futuristic doppelganger to battle it out at the very edge of the universe. Man, what a bummer that this guy's awesome beard turned out to not be real after all.
Number 3, Iron Man and Magneto. Now when I say that, your first thought probably is, well of course Magneto would win a fight fighting a guy in a metal suit, but this wasn't the case during an X-Men vs Avengers storyline. If you think this is a no contest, you've never met Tony Stark. So Stark gets buried by Magneto under 200 tons of rubble, because even though Tony's suit at this point was made of carbon nanotubes, the island that he was fighting on was made of metal. So step 2 was for Tony to release a swarm of high-tech magnets to try and throw him off his game a little bit. This of course didn't work. You're giving magnets to Magneto, you know? So Magneto tried reaching out to the cosmos to channel power from other planets, but in doing so, he sensed a disruption in the form of the Phoenix Force. So while he was distracted there, Tony took this as an opening and knocked him out. Now as fun as this was, and it led to other fun things, it was also highly unlikely that Iron Man will beat Magneto again. If this happened on the big screen, fans would rip it apart, no doubt about it.
Coming in at number 2, we have Mr. Fantastic versus the Maker. Now, most fights on this list have been between two variants of a character that have only briefly encountered one another, or eventually were able to reconcile their differences. But in the case of the Maker, this is a version of Reed Richards that is just as smart and cunning as his regular heroic self, but using that intellect for his own twisted goals again and again. Not only are these two versions of Reed Richards directly opposed to one another, but their greatest battles have involved the fate of each of their respective universes, with the Maker still dead set on finding a way to restore the Ultimate Universe to its former glory. And finally, at number 1, we have Deadpool versus Evil Deadpool, a matchup that definitely has the weirdest origin story compared to anyone else on this list. Following an encounter with a love-struck stalker superfan, Deadpool searches her house to discover that she's actually been collecting discarded body parts that he'd lost over the years in her freezer. Weirded out by this turn of events, Deadpool dumps all of the parts into a dumpster, not realizing once they thaw that all of the body parts will Frankenstein together because of his healing factor, forming a new, even more hideous Evil Deadpool. With this Deadpool wanting to accomplish evil feats that even the real Deadpool wouldn't consider, it's not long before the two super violent copies are battling it out.